Hey, welcome back, faithful politics listeners and watchers. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, I am your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram. How's it going, Josh?
Doing well, thanks, Will.
And today we have with us Angela McArdle, who currently serves as chair of the National Libertarian Party, serves as co-organizer for the Rage Against the War Machine, and is a two-time candidate for California's 34th Congressional District. Angela was a key
Nice.
organizer for the LA 2021 initiative to overturn the LA vaccine mandate, and she believes strongly in the sanctity of personal choice and allowing people to govern their own lives. So welcome to the show, Angela.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I have to ask. So this Rage Against the War Machine, like that is a like is that like an activist group or because whenever I see the words Rage Against the and the machine, the war is sort of
Hmm.
like I don't know, it doesn't really matter because it's probably one of the greatest bands of all time.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a 501c4. We're an anti-war organization, and we host rallies and demonstrations, and we just do various peace activism across the country.
Awesome, cool. Being the chair of the Libertarian Party, probably the best question I can ask you at the top is like, what is the Libertarian Party, and what do you guys believe?
Sure. So we are the third largest political party in the United States. We believe in personal and economic freedom. We advance individual rights. At the National Party, we do that at the federal level. That's what our focus is. We stand for peaceful foreign policy, laissez-faire economics, capitalism, personal choice regarding how you live your private life. We don't take any oppositional stances to homosexuality, gay marriage, adult drug use, things like that. We want the government to be as out of your life as we can possibly get it, and that's what we try to make happen for you.
I really like that, actually. I kind of want the government as far out of my life as they possibly can without it too negatively affecting my roads and my,
Your roads.
air pollution, things like that. So what kinds of things should the government be involved in according to libertarian philosophy and
Sure.
ideology?
Have you seen the roads in the Los Angeles city of LA?
I have not. I live in Richmond,
It's like
so
a third
I've seen
world
them around here.
It's like a third world country. Government roads, they just crumble, disintegrate in the rain. They don't do a very good job of it. So you'll get a variety of responses from libertarians on when it comes to how much the government should be involved in our roads, and it'll be from zero to a tiny bit. Uh, you know, the toll roads seem to function pretty well. People want to travel from point A to point B. People ask me all, like, it's a very common question, so we have a lot of jokes about the roads. What do you want to do about the roads, Angela? And so I just say I just want to blow them up. I'm just so tired of these roads. I'll just nuke them. We'll just teleport from point A to point B. If we didn't have roads, we'd probably already be traveling interdimensionally. But generally we're not impressed with what the government has done with roads. I'm not impressed.
Yeah, so you mentioned so the Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in America. Um, I would venture to just guess, and I'm not basing this on anything substantial, more anecdotal, but most of the people I talk to would probably identify with like a larger portion of libertarian sort of like fundamentals than they would, like Republican or Democrat. Like I think
Sure.
that's definitely probably where I fit in. I mean, like, I'm a registered as much as I can be a registered Democrat in Virginia, but like, I do own guns. I want to keep my guns,
Hmm.
but I also don't really care who you marry. It's just like I
Right.
just want government to kind of stay out of it. So like, what's I guess like how come the Libertarian Party isn't like just this huge monstrosity that's causing like fear to the big like Democrat Republican monster.
I mean, I think we could probably do 3 whole episodes on that. I have like a, magnum opus of, that I could unveil on that. But let me think. Things that I feel comfortable saying in a shorter period of time. Ballot access is challenging. There are a lot of government barriers to entry. They work really aggressively to keep us from disrupting their control on politics. For example, in New York, gubernatorial candidate Larry Sharpe in 2018 met the threshold to get ballot access. And we have had something like 50 state ballot access in the last 2 presidential election cycles. So 2018, he gets it as the governor candidate. And then in 2020, the law just changes and they're like, oh, you got 15,000 signatures in a short period of time. We're going to make it 45,000 signatures and we're going to cut the signature gathering time in half. Just completely absurd. And it costs $500,000 to do. And there's all kinds of other technical minutia challenges that go along with it. So you could put in all the work and they could, potentially wipe out like a giant chunk of your signature so you wouldn't make it. So there's barriers, like that. There's financial issues. And then, we contend with, it's the most important election of your lifetime every 4 years. Everybody perceives there to be a lot at stake. And people change. And I think that things have become hyper politicized, especially in the last decade, since like 2014, and so people just perceive there to be a lot at stake. They perceive their political identity to be like a serious part of the rest of their identity. And there are a lot of implications for that, for third party or fringe politics, and most of them are not, super helpful.
That's fascinating. I want to kind of return to my previous question and dig into it just a little bit because, one of the things that you always, or I say you, as in a general you, I hear a lot is, that a government involvement is necessary. There are certain things that the market does not do well at assessing or addressing. And that there are certain, like the place for government, what does the Constitution say for defense, national defense, domestic tranquility, I should know this, but, those kind of big pillars of kind of where the government should be involved. And I kind of heard you say, there's like some libertarians are like, there should be zero government involvement in anything, which essentially would mean no government, right? And then, right? I'm trying to figure out what else that would mean, right? So,
I mean,
and then minimal government. So where does does the Libertarian Party have an official stance on it?
We do.
And if so, what is the official stance of the pillars or areas where markets, and maybe the language isn't this way, but markets won't do what's needed or can't do what's needed or whatever it may be, and where government involvement is necessary, if there is any?
Yeah. The official stance is that the party is welcoming to anarchists and people who want minimal government equally. And the general understanding of that is that the government is such a crazy, complex Leviathan right now that if I want absolute, pure, voluntary hierarchies, voluntary society, and someone else wants to return to constitutional law, there's zero reason for us to be fighting over which goal is more important to fight over, because we've got to fight in the same direction. We have to move the Overton window, we have to move policy, we have to move all of it in the same direction at the same time, and we're not very close to achieving constitutional rule. Sure, we'll fight over eminent domain once we get, the abolition of that, once we get a little bit closer to constitutional governance, but we're not close to that. And with respect to how much government do we need, I mean, how much government does the church need? How much government involvement does the church need? What's the right amount of government? I'd say 0. If there's a negative, if there's a number less than 0, it's that
A
number.
negative. Well, apparently there are, right, at some level,
Yeah.
but I guess not in reality,
But
unless it's your bank
I mean,
account.
like, I don't know how much I no government involved in church. It's just that libertarians, we feel that way about a lot of other things too. Public schooling, for example. We don't have a problem with schools, but we don't like government schools, which are incredibly anti-Christian. The propaganda in government schools is really, really intense. It's very anti-family. Um, from my perspective, government schools exist because it's part of how government wants to remove God and the father as the figureheads of the family and replace it with itself, state, the ultimate father, the caretaker.
Our Father, who art in Washington, D.C.,
Exactly.
hallowed be thy name.
Exactly, which is not something I'm a fan of, from a Christian perspective or a libertarian
Sure.
perspective.
Yeah.
That's crazy. My first foray into, the political party, the Libertarian Party, probably came on the heels. I don't know how long ago. Whenever like Ron Paul was running,
Yeah.
my wife and I were newly married there, and we're just like, hey, this guy is sort of speaking our language. Like he seemed a little crazy, but like he seemed like he had the courage to stand by his convictions. And
The good kind of crazy, Will.
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of crazy is good in my book.
Good crazy.
But like, he sort of, I think, brought the Libertarian Party kind of to the mainstream, if you will.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
and his son Rand Paul, who I'm not a big fan of, but I can appreciate who he is. Like he's got a pretty consistent voting record on like spending, government spending,
Mhm.
like, and I can respect that. Like even though I think there's something that he probably should have voted to fund, but that's neither here nor there. So like when we look at sort of these figureheads, like how are they helping promote being a libertarian? Because like I'll give you a good, for instance, if I told my mom, who's like this 70-year-old Asian lady who still lives in Southern California, that's where I grew up, that I'm becoming a libertarian, she would probably get nervous because she doesn't know what that means. so
Sure.
so like how can these bigger, larger than life characters sort of like help you, just
Mhm.
expand kind of like this machine?
Well, I mean, Ron Paul did an incredible feat. He ran for president under the Libertarian banner in 1988, and then after that, he went back to being a member of Congress as a Republican, but talking about libertarianism. His presidential runs in 2008 and 2012 grew the Libertarian Party and broader movement tremendously. Rand Paul, who was a little bit more straight-laced and conservative, still does really incredible libertarian work. I mean, the policy work that he does on criminal justice reform is really great. He tried to pass Breonna's law to end no-knock raids federally.
Yeah.
He does really good. Like, I don't usually like bipartisan work. I'm like, oh, that's like the worst
Really?
of both sides working together for the worst outcome for everyone. But he has a different take on it where he's like, actually, let's find libertarian solutions to problems. Yeah, he does great work. Senator Mike Lee is very libertarian leaning as well. And Thomas Massey, also a congressional member in Congress. So there's 4 of them.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
535.
do libertarian, like, so if you were to, take a slice of the Libertarian Party down the middle, like,
Mhm.
would you wager that more of them probably lean more right than they do left, or
Socially, you mean like culturally?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's
it's not a dramatic skewing though. It's really not. Maybe it's 60-40. It's not really off the charts.
Interesting. Got it. So and my next question, are you guys running a 2024 presidential candidate?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Our national convention is at the end of May. It's Memorial Day weekend, and that's when we pick our presidential candidate. So it seems kind of late in the election cycle
Hmm.
because Super Tuesday doesn't have any bearing on us.
Hmm.
Republican and Democrat conventions, they happen in the summer.
Yeah.
But they basically just, coronate and make it official the guy who's already won on Super Tuesday.
Hmm.
So we just don't have Super Tuesday. So that's why it seems like we're behind.
Got it. So can you tell me a little bit about the candidates that you guys are going to
Sure.
be?
Sure. So we have Mike Termott, who is a former police officer. He's running. He's from Virginia, I believe. We have Dr. Michael Rechtenwald, who is a really interesting guy. He is a former Marxist professor from NYU, and he was
Wow.
canceled. Yeah, right. Canceled over free speech issues in like 2018, and has had this really interesting, bona fide libertarian conversion over the last several years.
Wow.
I mean, so
That's
far
awesome.
as like, he had a writing spot at Hillsdale. Like he's really like made the full circle. So he's a really interesting guy.
True
Uh
convert.
he's a true convert, which I think is like a really cool messaging thing because it shows like we
Yeah,
do
that
welcome
is.
people from all backgrounds. And then you've got Lars Mapstead, who is like a Silicon Valley tech guy from California, and Chase Oliver, who was the disruptive Senate candidate in Georgia, who people think, quote unquote, stole votes from Herschel Walker, even though he is gay and much more culturally on the left. And Herschel Walker, talked about vampires and bats, which was probably,
Which not enough people are talking about in Washington.
yeah, it was.
Seriously.
Yeah, I think Herschel Walker had a lot of problems, and Chase Oliver was actually kind of far down the list. But you know, people think what they're gonna think.
That's amazing. So I will let you know that I actually voted. I voted libertarian in the last presidential election.
Beautiful.
Yes, it was beautiful because I didn't like either of our options. And guess what? I don't like either of our options again.
Yeah.
And so I will vote libertarian very likely in this next one. So you have I'm not a registered libertarian. I don't even think you
Sure.
can't in Virginia. You don't register, right? Yeah. So I
Wait, no.
did vote in the primaries. And I tried to move us away from the Trumpster, but it didn't. Alas, it didn't work. But I will. So I have a hypothetical question. I love, and hopefully maybe it won't be so hypothetical in the next few years, in the
Mm-hmm.
next 10 years, 20 years. But it's kind of even a thought experiment. So let's imagine that Libertarian Party gets the presidency, and
Okay.
let's imagine they get a significant amount of the Congress. What's next? What happens? What kind of steps are taken by these political candidates to try to move us in the direction of
Afuera.
the vision of the Libertarian Party in spirit?
Are you familiar with Javier Milei, the new president of Argentina?
I am not.
Oh man, you got to look him up. So he is a libertarian. He is a hardcore libertarian, an anarcho-capitalist like myself, who wants to get rid of all of it. And he got rid of like half of the government agencies. Department of Diversity,
Wow.
Equity, Inclusion, Department, like a bunch of like weird, departments that are non-essential. He just chopped them. Afuera, out. Um, yeah,
Afuera.
afuera. So that's what we do. We just start slashing, and there are a lot of things that we would like to get rid of that, mm, the legislative branch put in, like the IRS. It would take a little bit of work, but if we've got the majority of Congress, we just start chiseling away at it as much as we can, and some of it's going to fail at the Senate, so go back and do a rewrite,
Yeah.
pass a watered down weak version that nobody's really excited about, but it would still be historic,
You'd
so
create a slasher film that the entire Congress is in their worst
so
nightmares right
amazing. It
now.
would be so amazing. Like maybe people worry about like jobs. All these people are going to be homeless. Okay, I would do a jobs program where everybody just got minimum wage to go clean the park. That would be my libertarian, like, were you sitting on like a really healthy six-figure salary at your deep state bureaucratic job you've had for 2.5 decades? Well, good news. There's a $12 an hour park trash pickup job waiting for you. So,
Not
those would be,
$15 an hour? What's up with that?
yeah, no. We gotta do job creation. We don't want to make it harder, by driving up the minimum wage. So yeah, that's what libertarians would do.
Yeah. So I do have to try to like interject, some pragmatism
Sure.
into the idea. Like I'm with you. I think that government is too big. Um, I'm glad I'm not the one that has to choose which departments to cancel and know how all the
Hmm.
pieces kind of fit together. You know, um, I'm not necessarily a fan of TSA. So I would
Oh
say
yeah.
if there's one, like,
Oh yeah.
funny story. Like I've been flying a lot. Is like I recently bought the TSA pre-check, which is like it's a bit of a ripoff. Like for those that don't know, but it's like
Totally.
$75 for like 5 years. But like you're basically paying for the convenience of the inconvenience that the TSA is creating. So it's like a self-licking ice cream cone, anyways. But like if you were to actually cancel like some government agencies, and maybe you can kind of fill us in on which ones would probably be at the top of the list, then like it would create a hole. So I'm not just talking about like jobs being lost or whatever, but like services rendered, stuff like that. Like how would sort of the hole be filled by the libertarian philosophy?
Sure. So TSA as a great example. People would cheer, right?
Yes.
People would cheer. Airlines would just have their own. We would just go back to airlines doing it on their own. Before you board, United scans your luggage. You
Mm-hmm.
know, different airlines could decide if they want you to have bottled water in because one flippin' psycho tried to get a bottled water bomb in. It also no one blew up. It was just one crazy person. I feel like bottled water would make a comeback.
In a
Um,
big way, yeah. Big
yeah,
big water would be happy.
airline
Yes,
travel
yes,
would
they would.
probably also like increase. I know
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of libertarians who don't want to fly, and I think this is part of it. Like it's some of the stuff that happens to people too. I went through TSA with my transgender friend a couple years ago, and the way they groped her was so humiliating and disgusting. Like, it's, I can't stand, like, I've had them pat me down a couple of times where I've been like, like, I don't consent, like, you don't touch me that way. Like, this is totally rapey and gross. And the way that they patted this person down was just like horrifying. So I think you'd see, like, self-esteem improve across the country. People just get less violated. I think it would be really great. Um, things like IRS. We didn't have income tax until the early 1900s. We had roads just fine. The states took care of it. States took care of it. Consumption tax. There are a lot of other ways to pay for things. Um, Same with schools. People have the literacy rates were going up before federal education was instituted. People do want to take care of each other. We do want to be literate. We do want to succeed and, be competitive in the global market. Education started to tank after the creation of the Federal Department of Education. That was under the Carter administration. We didn't even have that prior to that, and we were a world power, And now look, we don't compete with Chinese and Indian students in STEM classes. We just don't. We are riding the coattails of our past, successful generations, but it will
Mm-hmm.
catch up with us.
What about like so other kind of popular issues that you see brought up, like immigration?
Yeah.
So what's sort of the libertarian view on immigration?
It is a hotbed point of contention right now. So in our party's platform, it skews pretty open borders. We think that crossing the border, an imaginary line, it's a victimless crime. You just step from point A to point B. No one got robbed. No one got injured. It makes no sense. People who are a little bit more conservative in the party take the position that with welfare and entitlement programs running rampant, it's not okay to come across the border and take tax dollars away from other people. A lot of people complain about, like, oh, what about the people that waited in line the right way? It doesn't really, like, I hear it, but it doesn't emotionally persuade me. From my perspective, that the immigration system is extremely broken and we need to fix it. I love that people come here, the best people come here from all over the world to get employed in the tech sector. And like, it's highly competitive, and it should be. And businesses should be able to employ whoever they want at whatever wage rate, from my perspective. But I do wonder, if our foreign policy has fueled some of the border crisis that we've seen recently. For example, people coming over the southern Texas border, I live in Texas, who are coming over from war-torn countries in North Africa, Syria, and I look back and I think, like, oh, Hillary Clinton, what she did in Libya, some of the actions that the UN took over there that were pretty ugly too, things that NATO has done. Like, has the United States foreign policy been so destructive overseas that we have created a refugee crisis, and so now we are soaking it all up? And I don't know what the perfect answer is, like, to stop it immediately, but I know that we should at least look at the long-term effects of our actions and try to stop, at least stop what we're doing that's perpetuating the problem.
So this brings up a super interesting conversation and topic in my mind, because and let me just give just a little bit of context, because I was thinking I want to talk about what the Libertarian Party does with the Defense Department and the Army and national defense. And then and for sure would love for you to talk about that, but it's connected to this idea of borders, and here's the way I see it as connected. When you think about a nation's sovereignty, right? If you think about nations and their definitions, you start to think about borders.
Yep.
And borders being important for having some kind of definition, geographical definition of what a nation is. And of course, we could say, well, why do we need that? And that's a great conversation. Why do we need that? And we may not need that. And yet at the same time, it does seem like everyone in the world's got to be on the same page if we don't need that, or else someone's going to start encroaching, it would seem to me, on those borders, defining their own borders. And so how do we work through this? And I guess, what is the kind of libertarian philosophy on the idea of borders? You kind of have been alluding to it there, but do we see America as a nation state? Do we see it as a country with defined borders geographically? And if so, are these what do we do with those borders? I hear that what you're saying, they are imaginary to the extent that there's no line naturally there, right? But they're not necessarily imaginary, it wouldn't seem to me, in terms of our conceptualization of America as a country and of the various states that make up America. And I'm just curious as to how this works in the libertarian philosophy as a faithful libertarian voter.
Sure.
As I said before.
Yeah,
I say that tongue in cheek, but seriously though, how are those things defined, and what place does what in the world?
Amazing.
Look at all these balloons. That is amazing. Does the armed forces have in all of this?
If we're going to have a standing military, it needs to just be for defensive purposes, right? And imagine bringing troops home from across the world and just having them here to defend the border. That would be a much better alternative. We would have way less veteran suicides. You would not have people who are ripped away from their families for nearly as long. Like, you would just have far less tragedy. You would have a secure border. You would probably also be able to enact border immigration reform faster, I think, too, because you would have less attention focused on tragedy at the border, and it would be far less politicized, so people would be able to do effective work without using the border crisis as political token. Like, why should people have a border? There's a lot of anarchists who say no border, right? But there are also people who are very concerned about preserving the American way of life. And when I say that, I don't mean that to sound like some cringy, white nationalism token. I mean the place where you can come from anywhere else in the world and, be successful because we have meritocracy and we don't bleed in bad policies, and we don't bleed ourselves dry with socialism by giving handouts to people who are in crisis constantly and in refugee situations. And I think that those are valid concerns. Now, if we're going to adopt that policy, from my perspective, we should be consistent on it and not give out tons of socialist handouts to the people who already live here as well. I think it's tit for tat, and we can't blame all of our problems on immigrants, especially since they do a lot of the jobs that spoiled American teenagers don't want to do anymore. So
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
the border is complex, and it's an issue that libertarians really are wrestling with right now as we see all this stuff happening.
How did the Libertarian Party start? Like, what's the origin story?
So the Libertarian Party started in 1971 as a reaction to Richard Nixon's bad policies. You got the Vietnam War and going off the gold standard. Two terrible things that were going on at that time. It was started by a mix of Goldwater Republicans who were just disgusted and fed up with the party. At that point in time, you could be a libertarian, but it was what we call small L, right? The party didn't exist yet. And then also some more left-leaning libertarians like Carl Hess, who is, widely known in libertarian circles, but not outside of that. People who were just a little bit more culturally to the left, more hippie vibes than Goldwater GOP vibes. They got together and founded it under the guidance of David Nolan, who has since passed away, but he's the founder of the party. And you can find some really interesting quotes, commentary from him, just smattered across the internet on why he did it. But it was radical at the time. The party was not founded to be sort of a centrist, best of both worlds. It was founded to be a radical reaction to the failures of the federal government at the time.
I think that's like, it's sadly, I don't know, one of the things that isn't making sort of like the Libertarian Party more popular, in my opinion, because I'm like, when you look at the history of like the Democrats and the Republican Party, going back to the Whigs and everyone else, like that's a history most of the political parties don't want to talk about. They're
Yes.
just like, nope, Democrats, no, we elect the first black president, yay. But then like go back like 200 years, like I think both parties definitely have their their stains on history.
Totally.
But I'm curious though about something that you had on your website. It seemed like, did the Libertarian Party kind of go through a great reset of sorts?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When you came on board, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it was called the Reno Reset.
Oh.
So the Mises Caucus, I was the candidate for the Mises Caucus in this election cycle. We worked to take over leadership of the party, and there was there's been a lot of controversy on whether or not the word takeover should be used. I considered it a Jesus take the wheel moment. But the party had gone very far culturally to the left. And it was, in my opinion and the opinion of many other Christian members, it was pretty openly hostile to people who were Christians, people who were just socially conservative. When I say socially conservative, I mean libertarians who would not ever vote for Christian nationalism or try to push, their beliefs on people via legislation, but just who are socially Christians, and that's their private life. The party would send out, emails celebrating Pansexuality Day and kind of fringe LGBTQ stuff, but you would never see any sort of win that for like homeschool rights celebrated, anything like parental related, just like raw milk, middle America issues, just never celebrated. And so I said, one of the things that we need to do, in addition to being better messengers and getting back to the roots of the founding of this party, is just make it so that people who are more socially conservative can just be comfortable and feel welcome. Because there's no push to kick gay marriage out or make gay people feel unwelcome. We got a lot of gay members, people who have alternative lifestyles. We've got some polygamists. We got all kinds, but can we also have some Christians? And it was like, no, 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 no. It's like, well, that's if you're getting upset about that, then that shows me there's something that's wrong that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and because it seems like, one of the things about the Democrat Party that is difficult is it is a big tent, right? So you've got, pro-life, pro-choice Democrats, you've got, pro two-way Democrats, non-two-way, like there's just this huge tent, and who's ever leading the party is just trying to, herd all the cats
It's
so that
hard.
they can get stuff done. And it seems like the Libertarian Party is kind of similar in
Oh,
some
yeah.
aspects. So like, how do you like balance like, the different factions, needs, wants, and whatnot?
Well, it's exhausting. Quite frankly, I don't. There are factions within the party who hate my guts. I think there are people who would probably do like actual violence to me if they were alone in a room. And I do not prioritize their needs by any means. I prioritize the needs of the people who got me elected, and I prioritize my fiduciary responsibility to the party. So the party was founded to be like a radical vehicle of, of messaging. Like that's what it was founded for. And there are also now, 50 years later, a lot of people who want to win elections. So I make sure that we have radical messaging and that we don't water things down. And I also make sure that I provide tools to people who want to win elections. And if people are like, I'm mad that you're not sending out enough emails about pansexuality, and I'm like, well, I invite you to sit with your discomfort. Like no one's ever driven a gay person out. We're super friendly to everyone. But guess what? We're not okay with the United States funding war in Ukraine. And if you find that offensive, I'm so sorry. Seek therapy, but don't seek me to change my message on war.
So that's all, this whole thing is so fascinating to me, and I love talking about it because there's this huge part of me that really does like feel libertarian in my core. This live and let live. This idea of, hey, look, you guys can live the life you want to. Part of me is just like, why does the government have any involvement in marriage at all?
Yep.
Is that like a church thing, or an individual choice thing or a culture thing? Like, why does the government have to come in? And there are arguments that have, been made for and against that, of course. But one of my questions is when we're thinking about like how, like, let's say, like thinking about the radical messaging and what does that look like, the radical messaging? And then I guess this is kind of a follow-up with that, but where does the Constitution but where does the Constitution fit in all of this? Like, is the Libertarian Party a very pro-Constitution party? Is it, and what does that look like in terms of its interpretation of the Constitution?
Sure. Radical messaging can be subjective and sometimes it is hit or miss, but perfect example is Ron Paul in his GOP presidential campaign getting on stage in Kentucky and telling Kentucky conservatives that he thought we should decriminalize heroin. And people gasping and being like, oh, and then him just kind of gently laughing and saying, you're going to go out and shoot up heroin if we decriminalize it? No, you won't, No, you won't. We just won't be locking people up for like tragic, victimless crimes they're just hurting themselves, and people kind of relaxed a little bit. It's just telling the truth, which I think is also really important, from a Christian perspective. We cannot build
Absolutely.
our right. We can't build our foundation by bending the truth or distorting it to conform to lies so that the people around us are going to be more comfortable. We don't have to be rude. We don't have to insult people to tell the truth, but we should tell the truth. And that's really important to me as a libertarian. The Constitution.
Yeah, the would a libertarian president declassify all the UFO stuff?
Yes. Yes. Declassify the UFO stuff, declassify the JFK stuff. Like, enough is enough. Just declassify it. I think that's why they're fighting so hard against RFK Jr. The Democrats and the Kennedy family. It's like they're afraid. It's just like, you know what? We're just gonna rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, and speaking of RFK, I mean, why isn't RFK jumping on the Libertarian Party bandwagon? I know that might be an unanswerable question.
No, I mean there's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff that I can't talk about, but I mean I'd say there's some disagreement in his campaign on whether or not he should. There are a lot of old school Democrats in that campaign, and the other half of the campaign is libertarians, and there's definitely some strife there, and there are a lot of our members who want him to jump in, if not solely just for ballot access, because having him, he'd easily get 10%. And we'll have at least 48 states. 50 states is going to be very expensive this year with the stunt that the state of New York pulled. And Illinois is very difficult too, but we would have at least 48. It would be so much easier for him. Someone said it would be Airbnb-ing our ballot access for a single term.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but he does make some pretty decent points. Like,
Sure.
I mean, I'm a very sort of rabid anybody but Trump kind of person personally, but like RFK says something on the trail about, your home interest rates going with you instead of the property, because like during the pandemic, like everybody refinanced, right? And I'm sitting on an interest rate that I'd be like ridiculous to get up and move and whatever sell my house. So I think that's great. But on the COVID thing, I do want to ask you a little bit, because I know that you've got some experience here in this area, especially in California. Like, how do you balance like personal freedom, medical safety, but also respect people's like personal freedom? I mean, whether it's the church, whether it's mandatory vaccinations, whether it's whatever. I mean, yeah, I'd love just kind of get your thoughts on that.
How do we balance personal freedom with medical safety?
Yeah, like just the health and public safety is probably what I'm.
Public safety. Got it. I mean, I'm just not impressed at all with what I've seen happen under the guise of public safety. I have family members who've had pericarditis from the COVID shots. I know people who've died, who had strokes. Mandatory vaccination has been, I think, like a catastrophic failure around COVID-19. I'm really glad that there were elderly people who got access to things that kept them safe, but for children and young men who are playing sports to just fall over and have a stroke while they're playing soccer, it's nuts. It's like you've got to leave it up to the individual. When you take away personal choice, real tragedy happens. Seeing people arrested in California who were surfing by themselves, like alone on the beach for the sake of public safety. There's no one for miles, and the cops are wrestling them out of the water. And people committed suicide. They were so lonely. You saw like gay people who were estranged from their families lose their jobs and then have to like go move in back home with family that didn't like them, and women who were like getting out of the home and going to work was their escape from like a domestic violence, like, pit of misery. And it's just, there were so many awful things that happened, I think, in the name of public safety. We got to let people we got to let people sort out their own lives. I mean, ultimately, we know what's best for us. Illegal immigrants here who in LA especially who, they work under the table jobs, and when everybody was forced to go home, like it's not just that they couldn't pay, for their own food and safety. They didn't qualify for unemployment. They didn't get anything. And then they can't send money back home to Mexico to grandma or their kids. It's just it's just a waterfall of tragedy. I just let people make their own decisions, and if you're freaked out or you feel unsafe, go ahead and stay home.
Yeah, it connects to me again, this idea about, and the question about the Constitution. When
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the way in which the Constitution was supposed to structure our government, was supposed to be the highest law in the
Yep.
nation, against which all other laws are judged and either allowed or disallowed. My question is, with the Libertarian Party, where does that where is the Constitution in the Libertarian Party? What role does it play? And in what kind of amendments would the Libertarian Party seek to make, if any, to the current Constitution
Sure.
that we have?
So it doesn't play an official role. Most of us would like to go back to constitutional governance. That's like an important thing. We're not like, let me think about a better way. We're not revisionists, or we don't believe that the Constitution is like a living document, if that makes sense. Like, we think
Mm-hmm.
that the founders intended a particular thing. And most of us also see the flaws of the Constitution, and we're like, that was the best document that had ever been written for human governance and human history. And yet, here we are. It didn't do a very good job, unfortunately. Jefferson didn't bind anybody down with the chains of the Constitution. It was a problem, And then there are also members who are like, yeah, and I mean, it was really great at the time, but then we still had, like slavery and that whole thing, 3/5 of a person, that was undone, and so we don't want to be knocking out any of those amendments. But I would certainly remove eminent domain. I'd remove a lot of the amendments that enable the erosion of our rights, income tax, anything related to that. Yeah. Prohibition was the giant colossal failed experiment. We wouldn't want to bring that back.
Hmm. So, you know, we're already in the midst of the 2024 election cycle. There does seem to be quite a hunger for something different. Um, and I'd love to just hear what you've got sort of in mind, to help elect more libertarians.
Mm-hmm.
And what can we look forward to, for the future for the Libertarian Party?
The National Party needs to help equip people at the local level to run races and win. So, we've got a lot of really good tools for candidates. We have a software program called Voter Gravity that basically levels the playing field between us and Democrats. It's professional, high quality software where you make, it generates full of data, a walk list, tells you what to do in your campaign, to collect your votes, and so on and so forth. We've got professional websites available for our candidates. We've got cool stuff like that. And whoever our presidential candidate is, that person needs to serve as a vehicle for growth for down ticket candidates to really like ignite a grassroots movement, get people excited about individual rights and freedom, and find out what they can do in their local community. And something else that I'm really passionate about that's related to that is getting people excited and working on the right things and not focusing too much on the internal minutia of the party. Because in the beginning, I think, we kind of asked, this was something that came up about, like the history of the party or what went right, what went wrong, why aren't we bigger? And I think that over the past couple of decades, there's been a huge emphasis on internal governance, budgets, spreadsheets, this and that. Obviously, we got to make money to pay the bills, but the whole reason we're here is to just like get this country passionate and on fire for liberty. And, that's what we need to do.
That's really well said. So, if there's like one message that you wanted to give to, like, we have a pretty diverse audience that listens to the podcast because of our political differences. It appeals to people that are on both sides of the spectrum. And we've had a lot of different voices that have come on to the podcast. It's certainly not a Christian podcast in the sense that we've had a lot. There have been a lot of people that don't have any belief at all. Different religions come on. So it's just a wide spectrum is what I mean. And what would be like your, like, that 30-second elevator pitch, but maybe thinking about it like that, for why people should vote libertarian in this next election?
Sure. I mean, Republicans and Democrats have not saved you yet, and they're not gonna. We care about you as the individual. We care about your individual rights. And most of all, like, we support just human progress and flourishing. And we see just the intrinsic value of every human being. And that's our philosophy. And that's what undergirds our politics. And that's what we're going to fight for. And we're going to do it, no matter what.
That's awesome. So this is kind of my last question, and then I'll close us out with just some practical questions as how people can get involved in stuff. But let's say it was like me, and I'm like, hey, I want to run for libertarian, be a candidate in the local Virginia election. What are next steps for someone like me? If, like, say, what would that look like for me to go from pastor of a small church to a candidate for the Libertarian Party?
The first thing you would do is pray about that decision.
That's true. Come on, somebody.
And the next thing you would do would be to reach out to the Virginia Libertarian Party and to reach out to us at lp.org and find out how we can help you, because we have a lot of awesome resources we'd send your way.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Angela. And guys, this has been Angela and McArdle, and you can check them out. We'll put links to the Libertarian Party and everything they're doing. And until next time, keep your conversations not right, not left, but up. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.